Hey everyone, Theo here. Today I'm reviewing the Orico USB 4 NVMe SSD enclosure. This is USB 4, so the transfer speed is up to 40 gigabits per second. Here are the specifications. The model number is M2V01-C4. The NVMe SSD that it can support is M.2, M-key. The transfer speed of 40 gigabits per second is equivalent to 5 gigabytes per second. Alright, just to give you the bottom line up front, I was able to get better performance with this enclosure on a Mac compared to a Windows computer, even though all the computers I've tested support USB 4 speeds. More specifically, I was able to get higher write speeds on the Macs that I've tested. I purchased this for US $170 from Amazon. So these are the items included in the box: a quick start guide, which you probably do not need to read because the installation is very straightforward. That's the enclosure, a screwdriver, 2 screws, thermal pad, USB Type-C to Type-A cable, USB Type-C to Type-C cable. This braided USB-C cable is 32 centimeters. It's not very flexible because the cable is quite thick. There is no mention whether this is USB 4 or Thunderbolt, but the speed is all that matters. This is how the enclosure looks. The build quality is extremely solid. This material is aluminum alloy. Alright, let's install our SSD. Just remove the screw and pop open the case. This is the Samsung 970 EVO Plus SSD that I will be using in the enclosure. This is also the SSD that the company tested with the enclosure. On Orico's website, I found out that in addition to the M-key connector, which is supported, the enclosure also supports the B+M-key connector, and the SSD size should measure 22 by 80. Installation is really straightforward. You just slide it into this slot here. Next, we will install the thermal pad. Now this is a trick I found online. So I have 2 small pieces of blue tack here. I'm going to place this on top of the SSD and put the plate back on. And this should stick the thermal pad onto the plate. So now I'm going to mark out where I'm going to place the thermal pad on the plate. So I'm not going to paste this onto the SSD because in the future, if I want to upgrade or change to another SSD, I can simply reuse this thermal pad. So now I can just peel this off and paste this to the exact location that I have marked out. The other screw is to hold down the SSD, and now let's put this back on. I've just connected the enclosure to this laptop with USB 4 ports. So the color of the enclosure matches very nicely with gray colored or light colored laptops. I have a benchmark software running, so the blinking light indicates activity. These are the benchmarks that I have for you based on my limited testing. Right at the top, we have the Samsung 970 EVO Plus advertised speeds. So we have 3.5 gigabytes per second for read and 3.3 gigabytes per second for write. After I installed the SSD into the Orico enclosure, I tested it with the M1 Mac Mini, the M1 MacBook Air, and the Microsoft Surface Laptop Studio. And as you can see, the read speeds on these 3 devices are pretty similar. I was able to get 2.8 gigabytes per second for read speeds. However, the write speeds actually differ quite noticeably. The best result I was able to get was from the M1 Mac Mini. I was able to get 1.3 gigabytes per second write speeds. For the M1 MacBook Air, I was only able to get 937 megabytes per second. So that is less than 1 gigabytes per second, or just 28% of the advertised speed of the Samsung SSD. The worst performance is on the Surface Laptop Studio. I was only able to get 775 megabytes per second write speed, so that is definitely not ideal. Based on the limited testing that I have here, I am not able to recommend this Orico enclosure for use with Windows devices, and unfortunately I am not able to test this enclosure with more Windows devices. The fins on the enclosure do help with heat dissipation. However, the enclosure is still blistering hot with huge file transfers. Just for comparison purposes, the Samsung T7 SSD temperature is so much cooler with the same workload. So to conclude, this enclosure works better on a Mac compared to a Windows computer, and the Mac that you use also matters. According to the company's advertising, this enclosure should give you higher write speeds as well with the M1 MacBook Pro. Before you go, I just want to let you know that I will be getting the Akashi's USB 4 enclosure for testing soon, and I will be comparing that with the Orico enclosure. So do subscribe to my YouTube channel if you are interested to find out how those two enclosures compare.